I look like The Rock today? Or is it because that one photo of him wearing a black turtleneck went so viral and became so iconic that anyone who ever puts on a black turtleneck from here on out looks like The Rock? That's the crisis I'm having right now. Welcome back to the Newsfloor. My name is Valerie Lee, and this is the show. This is the place where we go over all of the top news and conversations around dance music and the nightlife industry, sharing all of the new releases, the top releases, the best tunes that you gotta hear from in and around the world of dance music, and interviews with your favorite artists and people that are making things happen. So I'm excited to welcome you back here to the Lost Resort TV channel on Twitch. We have a great episode again, as usual. The news is exciting and all over the world, as we typically do, cover everything going on around the world in the rave universe. Illegal raves that happened ahead of a national lockdown in England. A bit controversial, definitely something that we need to be aware of now that England is in that aforementioned lockdown. Stuff like this is going to be very important to keep an eye on and hopefully prevent, honestly, in a time where COVID is still rapidly spreading in a lot of these places. I'm excited to shed some light on some really wonderful fundraising efforts that are happening in Detroit. Detroit has been just a hub of wonderful positive news recently. If you were at all following what was going on here in the US around the election last week, that was a whole roller coaster on its own, but Detroit ended up being a really important place for some of the news that happened on that side of things as well. And also promising results from a German study in relation to COVID and how it spreads at concerts. Of course, us in the dance music and nightlife industries, we're all grasping onto whatever we can as far as how we move closer to bringing live shows back. So this is going to be super important. And new music from some absolute legends this week plays from Solomon, Fatboy Slim, and Sharam. We got some words with Sharam about a track that he just released that has a wonderful backstory to it, so stick around for that interview. And then last but not least, for the circuit, we're talking to Corrado Rizza, who's the director of Larry's Garage, a documentary that of course is focusing on Larry Levan and Paradise Garage, absolutely legendary. We're going to talk a little bit about that documentary right after this. As usual, there is plenty news to get into this week from the world of raving and dance music. The first being that a number of illegal raves took place across England ahead of the national lockdown, which went into place on Thursday, November 5th in the face of rapidly rising COVID-19 cases and infections over there. Once the news kind of came out that this was happening, I think a couple of people took it into their own hands to put together some illegal raves, which, you know, in most cases, in most times, I would never look down upon an illegal rave. It's fine. They happen all over the world. But unfortunately, the underground culture is not the same when we're talking about a health crisis, especially something that is as contagious and still kind of uncontained like COVID-19. So it was a bit of a bummer to hear that a number of illegal raves took place across England last weekend, despite the news that the lockdown was coming, or perhaps in lieu of the news that the lockdown was coming. There were raves that were shut down in Bristol, in Cheshire, and in London, and each of those events had anywhere from 700 to 800 people. So as you can imagine, that's not a good number to be hearing when COVID-19 cases are still widely on the rise. So definitely going to be something that the people of England will have to keep an eye on as they move forward and see if any of those events turned into spreading events. So not good news on that side. Over in Detroit, Wajid has announced fundraising efforts for the Underground Music Academy, which is so awesome. As I mentioned in the intro, I think Detroit has had a wonderful few weeks in the headlines, specifically at first here in the US on the more political side of things. But of course, Wajid putting together this fundraising initiative to raise money for what he calls the Underground Music Academy is such good news. He's going to be the director of this new initiative, and their intent is to create a support network for electronic music artists that will be coming out of Detroit. As we know, we actually talked to Paxahau last week on the circuit and talked a little bit about how Detroit has been this hub and center of music, especially for dance music, in the genres of techno, sometimes house as well, but techno was really born and raised in the city of Detroit. So this is going to be really exciting for talents that are, just coming up, bubbling up over in that city right now. The aim of fundraising will be to help to pay for hiring a digital team to capture, edit, and distribute the Academy's video tutorials in early 2021. And the eventual aim for the Underground Music Academy will be to have a brick and mortar site open by 2022 to actually host workshops on business, production, internships, job placements, and DJ gigs. So really hoping that this will become kind of a hub and a center for the community of passionate dance music producers and DJs. There is some good news coming out of Germany thanks to a study that was conducted that shows that COVID-19 spread risk is actually very low at concerts. So this study is obviously very promising and very important for a lot of people, not only fans who have been, hungry and yearning for live shows to come back, but specifically for the music industry, those who run venues, who are promoters, who maybe were festival producers. These are the people that have been out of work for the past few months and are eager to hear positive news like this. So this study actually indicated that the risk for COVID-19 spread is actually low to very low in concert settings, but that's presuming that the venue has adequate ventilation and also assuming that organizers are adhering to hygiene and capacity protocols. So those are 2 or 3 caveats to be very aware of. This isn't just live shows like they used to be pre-COVID, but this is actually shows that are very aware and very conscious of the new kind of health and safety protocols that we should be adhering to. So the study actually consisted of 1,200 participants who were invited to a concert-based experiment where different groups attended a concert, varying levels of social distancing measures. Everyone in attendance actually tested negative for COVID, and they emulated a real-world scenario of, people mixing, contact tracing, the simulation of fluid dynamics to track the risk of infection throughout the course of the events. So the results came in, with the right social distancing and ventilation measures in place, concerts could actually have little to no impact on the spread of a virus like COVID-19. So this is promising news. Of course, it's not a fail-safe. It is something that we can kind of slowly start to celebrate, especially with the recent news about there being really good progress on a vaccine. These are just steps that we're taking in the right direction. No final say yet. Of course, the study, it will be something that we'll be looking into. The study actually tested several different types of seating layouts, spacing rules, and that actually did play a big part in stopping a potential spread. The study also conducted the use of N95 masks with all the participants, noting that over 10% of those in attendance found them problematic, but that's actually quite low. Hopefully people who would be eager to attend a live show again would be willing to wear a mask to properly help prevent the spread. So this is good news, and we will be keeping an eye on that. And that's all the news for this week on the Newsfloor. Let's listen to some music. This week, the Beatport #1 and Pete Tong's Essential New Tune are once again the same track, and it is Solomon's Home. This is such a cool track. It is the first single off of Solomon's second album that's going to be coming in 2021. Home is actually the track that is the starting point for the album, as Solomon has shared. I loved the concept behind the name of this track. His whole thing was that music can find a home, but in order to really experience the music, you have to go to certain rooms that were especially designed to listen to it. And I imagine that when he said something like this, he's obviously talking about different clubs and rooms where you go, or where we used to go, at least, to go dance and listen to them. And the desire for it has never been greater, as he says. So let's check out the track Home by Solomon right now. Next up is the Newsfloor pick of the week, and this week I'm going with Back to Mine from Fatboy Slim. So Fatboy Slim, of course, a legend, a legendary talent. We all know him well. He signed on to do the latest installment of the Back to Mine After Hours themed series and contributed a massive 21 song mix set. It's really good. It's a fun listen, and I think it kind of fits the vibe that many of us are feeling right now. Being so far away from the dance floor, a lot of us are looking for something a little bit more relaxed or down tempo, kind of like easy listening. This is really fun, but has that kind of vibe in it. And amongst the 21 songs, he actually included a few of his own new and exclusive releases. One from him and Roland Clark called Sunset 303, If You Believe, in parentheses. And one that actually I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn about. It's actually from someone called Yum Yum Head Food, which is a hilarious name and so weird. But for those who don't know, including myself until recently, this is actually an alias of Fatboy Slim's, and one that he said he created to create songs that were more of this after party vibe. A quote from Fatboy Slim says, "Over the years, there's been so much action back at mine. So many friends, lovers, and lunatics who would congregate after the clubs have closed to laugh, share, and swap ideas and tunes and generally put the world to rights." So easy to imagine that some after hours parties or after hour get-togethers at Fatboy Slim's were probably really fun. So let's take a listen right now to the track.
Expand beyond the range of your ego, yourself, your familiar identity, beyond everything you have learned, beyond your notions of space and time, beyond the differences which usually separate people from each other and from the world around them. You must remember that throughout human history, millions have made this voyage. A few.
For the Newsfloor track of the week, I was so excited that I got a chance to sit down and talk with Sharam about his new track, which is called Exodus. It's an amazing track, not only because it's great to listen to, but also because it felt super timely. He actually sampled James Baldwin, who, for those who don't know, was a well-known civil rights activist, poet, author, well-revered for, what he contributed. So Sharam actually sampled some of his remarks from a famous 1965 debate with William F. Buckley regarding race in America. Obviously, for anyone who has been tuning into the current events in general, last week was the US elections, and overall 2020 and the past 4 years have been a crazy charged time for people just in general. So actually for Sharam to sample this felt really right and timely and a nice kind of homage to the original speech. I'm going to let him kind of explain a little bit about why he decided to do this. I think the story is beautiful. Sharam is an Iranian American and, talked a little bit about how important it was for him actually to learn about American history through songs and house music that sampled kind of these iconic figures back in the day. It's a wonderful story, so I will let him speak to it now. Let's get into it with Sharam. Hey, Sharam, thanks for joining me.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I think we just talked about it. It's been a crazy week. We're talking on Friday. It's hectic here in the US, but I'm glad we're kind of reaching the end of all of that. But
Well, to be seen. We don't know yet, but hopefully.
True. Very, very true. That is always a fair point. But I'm so excited to have you on specifically, at this time. I mean, it's been a crazy year. We all kind of know that, but specifically in this moment, in this month, this week, I feel like that your track Exodus that recently came out featuring James Baldwin, for those who don't know, civil rights icon, author, amazing icon, really, overall. For this track to come out in a time that's so politically charged, I would love to know a little bit about, the making of this track, because I know the instrumental was formerly a track that you had before, but this as a release now was a brand new idea. So talk to me a little bit about the process and how you got to get here.
Yeah, so obviously with everything that went on, that's been going on in 2020 and continues to go on, it's been a crazy year to say the least. And I always, I've always I've been in a mindset that everything that happens around us, politically, economically, geographically, geoeconomically, however, whatever tag word you want to put around it, it usually creates awareness to something. And one of the things that I always like tell a lot of my friends, I'm like, in the past like 4 years, one of the things that that's happened, whether you're on one side or the other side, one thing is for sure, we as American, I think, as people of the world, we have learned a lot more than we knew 4 years ago. We have become more educated. We have been, whether willingly or knowingly, we've been sort of thrown into this like massive condensed education process of how things work or how things don't work, whether, how our government is doing good or not doing good, how things have been a certain way and why they've been a certain way. So it's been a sort of awakening. And, of course, with all this stuff that happened with, civil rights movement and all that stuff, I thought there's a lot of things that a lot of people are just discovering for the first time, especially international people. And it sort of took me back to what happened with me when I first came to this country. I just knew about American history from a topical sense. What I was learning in school mostly was, it wasn't really things that I could grasp. I was struggling to learn the language, and sort of fit, know my place as a 14-year-old, high school, just like crazy stuff. So I didn't really learn in detail about what American history was. As time went by, I learned through pop culture and other avenues. But one of the ways I sort of came across and I was sort of educated about some of the figures of civil rights movement was through records, house records.
Yeah.
That, so people would just sample like Martin Luther King or Maya Angelou or somebody like that, like, Malcolm X, and their words would be on records. And, like these records would do the rounds in the clubs and the record stores. And they're like, oh, who's that on that record? And people look at me like, oh, you don't know? I'm like, I don't know. So that was sort of my entry point into like learning about these figures, So I, then, with social media, you see sort of where people's heads at and people's sort of like interests are. And you notice that as much as people talk about, knowing things, about equality and all this stuff that, again, that sort of news media feeds you, people really don't know much. And I'm no scholar. I don't know a lot of stuff. I mean, I know just like as much as my interest sort of has taken me. And I figured, records is, the way I learned about certain figures that sort of like learned about their work and the contributions. Records is a way to introduce people to, people in dance music generally to some like a figure like James Baldwin, who many people do not know about. Right. He's sort of like one of the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement, sort of equality, especially sexual equality movement. So I felt like, this would be, there'll be a sort of it's like enhanced awareness about all this. So it would be a great way for me to do my part. And I wasn't trying to sort of, I was very conscious of being not only respectful, but also not trying to hijack the message for like a commercial gain or any sort of notoriety out of that. My whole purpose was, I wasn't trying to take a side one way or another. My whole purpose was, let's introduce people to this iconic figure because, he had a lot of amazing things to say. He's a playwright, he's an author. They made a movie about him. It's on Netflix. So I figured that would be sort of my way of just bringing awareness to this very interesting figure.
I love that story and I love your perspective because I've always thought that where my love of music obviously started from a very, surface level position where you love the music, you like to go out with your friends and have a good time. But then you get a little bit deeper and you learn about, different artists from around the world and the struggles or the stories about why they chose to be a musician. Because, people don't choose to be a musician for the riches and fame all the time. It's a hard thing. So you learn about the stories and their culture. And I love to hear your kind of opposite perspective of, when you came to this country, it helped you learn so much about this place, this new place that you would come to. That feels like a really important part of the story that you're telling now. And I love the idea that people could be listening to this, hopefully on a dance floor in the future and be like, I don't know who's speaking right now. And like, I should learn a little bit more about this. So
correct. And if people who are interested, I mean, the part of the song the sort of speech that I use is from a debate with William Buckley, about who was basically responsible for America being what it is. And of course, America is a combination of its people and its history, and all different kinds of races and demographics have contributed. And this was a very interesting sort of topic. And I was watching it on YouTube. I'm like, wow, this is super powerful. And we wouldn't have known about it had it not been for some of the stuff that took place in 2020. First the pandemic, which creates a lot of time for people to be home and learning about things, and then of course the whole George Floyd saga, and just everybody was sort of interested. I'm like, well, it was sort of re-educating myself. I knew about him, but I never dug deep as much as I did, and I was like, well, everybody wants to do something, right? When something like that happens, everybody feels like, what can I do to help? What can I do?
What can you contribute? Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I believe in the best way that people can learn, from our historical figures, from our past, is to just study them, learn about them, learn about what they did, their books, the movies, their story, their upbringing. And there's a lot of things that you can learn from what they stood up for, how they stood up for those things. And I just thought it would be, okay, you know what, here's sort of my little contribution to that.
I love that too. I think, especially right now, it feels like a time where not only are things that from the past extremely relevant, even if they were, decades and decades ago, but I also feel like it's such a great time for creative people to find new formats and ways to tell, educate people or share their stories. Like, I even think of silly stuff like on social media, there's all these kids on TikTok who are giving like educational lessons now, but they really are sharing something interesting. And this is just kind of another way where maybe there's a casual dance music fan who goes to one of your sets and hears the song and then is like, oh wait, like I've actually walked away with some new information, which is like a really lovely thing to think about. I also want to talk about, you made this decision to send the proceeds of the track to Hampshire College's James Baldwin Scholars Program. Very appropriate, obviously. Tell me a little bit about the fund and why you chose to do that.
Well, I was thinking like, how do we, I just didn't want to donate to some organization. I don't know what they're going to do with the money, what their sort of political purposes. I didn't want that stuff to get lost. And I didn't want to make this record to become a political thing. I wanted it to be an educational thing. And Hampshire College is where James Baldwin taught for 4 years. So, and they have a program, a scholarship program under his name. So they just felt like this was the right place. So, I contacted them and they were very helpful and they were very supportive of the idea. And they said, they'll be happy to, accept whatever proceeds from this record comes in, and so that it was sort of like a collaboration to help them. So I'm trying to get as much attention to not only for the record but also to the scholarship program, because ultimately it goes to people that kids that need it, that don't have the means economically or otherwise to go to college or to learn and continue their education. So this would be a way to help them out.
It truly feels like we're entering into hopefully a new chapter of positivity, giving back to our community. And I feel like this is kind of a perfect introduction and a time to talk about your track being a contributor for that. So we're going to play the track
if there was no pandemic and I was able to DJ, what I would have probably done is taken the acapella and just played it over whatever record I was playing at the club at the time. In absence of that, I put it on top of the record that I already had made and I was tweaking. So I had to go sort of recater it to the vocals and make sure that it represents the vocal. The speech is a lot longer. I encourage people to go watch it on YouTube. But this is just like a little glimpse of what he said. Some of the part that I thought made a lot of sense in that short little 6-minute period.
It's always so interesting, picking the silver lining moments where you're like, if we hadn't been stuck in this crazy pandemic, I might not have done this really cool and wonderful positive thing. So on that note, we're going to play the track after this, but thank you, Sharon, for taking the time, and thank you for this track. It's so awesome.
Of course.
We'll wreck it. And if that happens, it's a very grave moment for the band.
Okay, as usual, we are back here with our friends at Stream Informer who put together a couple highlights of top streams from the past week and also ones to keep track of coming up this week. Last week, of course, I've talked about it already a couple times on the show, but US emotions were high during the election, so I feel like, thank God, there were a couple really good streams for us to tune out to and just kind of relax and listen to some good music. One of the major highlights came out of Pittsburgh, which saw the Hot Mass crew team together with Ohio legend Titanton, Duvante, and Jenny Arcade. Exciting house. It was really good. You can watch it if you missed it. It's on the Hot Mass PGH Twitch channel right now. Coming up this week, there are a couple of big streams to keep an eye out on. Of course, the first being Good Room's 6th anniversary live stream, which is taking place on the 12th of November, 12th through 15th of November, I should say. It's a couple days long, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern Time every day. For those who don't know, Good Room is a wonderful Brooklyn venue. It's been a staple of the underground scene, a favorite of Stream Informer as well. And the residents are coming on board. Juan McLean, Perel, Baltra, Analog Soul, some really solid names, so be sure to check that out. On Saturday, Roisin Murphy is taking to Stream World with a full band joining her, which is something fun and a little bit different. The dance pop legend just released an album, riding high on good reviews. So that set goes live at 10 p.m. Eastern, and you can actually find the tickets to that on Mixcloud Live. So be sure to give our friends at Stream Informer a follow on Instagram and Facebook if you don't already. They also have an awesome newsletter that highlights daily streams, so check them out. This week on the circuit, I was so happy to get a chance to sit down and talk to Corrado Rizza, who is the director of Larry's Garage. This is a somewhat new documentary that has come out highlighting the life and stories of Larry Levan, who was an absolute legend of New York, for Paradise Garage and the parties that happened there and kind of what it did for underground music and for DJ culture in general. If you don't know, you're gonna get to know right now. We're gonna play a trailer and I will let Corrado talk about it. It is wonderful to see his passion for the story and just the journey itself. So let's get into it without further ado. Hey Corrado, how are you?
How are you?
I see
Nice
you're perched on a porch in Miami. It looks nice.
Yes, it's a kind of, I'm playing with the images, I have the background, but it's like a mirror,
Yeah, we got to get creative with our backgrounds nowadays. We're always on video
Life
calls.
is a mirror. Let's say life is a mirror.
Deep. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on to talk about Larry's Garage. Of course, you're the director of this film, and I'm excited to kind of tell the world about this story, because I think that as I was kind of preparing to talk to you, I was looking at some of the research and the info, and I couldn't really believe it. I think I knew this somewhere in my head, but I couldn't really believe it that, Larry Levan, who was a total legend, he actually died the year that I was born in 1992. So I feel like there's a lot of people who, my age or even younger, who are, deep dance music fans who love it, and maybe they work in music or whatever it might be today. And they maybe have heard the name, but they might not know his legend and truly his impact. So I know you probably would tell people, if they were asking, like, who is Larry? How can I learn more about him? To check out the movie. But before that, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about him and why he inspired you to, spend so much time creating this film.
Yeah, I like this question because, of course, to know better the story about Larry, it's better watch the movie. Because what I did in the movie, I try to tell the story of Larry much more like person than like DJ. Of course, now he's like a legend.
Yeah.
But I think it's very simple. At the end of the 60s, the younger teenagers start to play music all around the city. Let's say New York in this case. Mm-hmm. We talk about people like Mancuso, Frankie Knuckles, and of course Larry Levan. They were both friends, very close friends. They were also different. Let's say different, because they were gay, they were black, so something a little bit strange at that time in New York, because New York, even now, is maybe the most open city in the world. At that time, it was before we talk about, the Stonewall movement, right? The story. That's a long story. I mean, the Village I mean, I want to be very clear. If you were gay in the past, was very dangerous. Maybe you go in jail. You understand
Of
what I mean?
course.
So people in the school. So these two guys, they start and they had a relationship with. They went to see drag queen and music together. They met Nicky Siano with the gallery, and then Mancuso. These two people, I think we are talking about the beginning of the clubbing.
Yeah.
The real beginning of the clubbing. Believe or not, this is the beginning, because like Beatles, they changed the music and the music became pop music, because before the Beatles, you had just a rock and roll. Before these people we were talking about, you had nothing, just people playing music home. You had the rock music. The record was very, when stuff like Pink Floyd, Genesis, and the music was very serious. With the DJing, the music start to change also in the way you're gonna propose the music to the people, and then
The format changed.
mixing, and make a special party in a special place that became clubs. So we are talking about the beginning of the clubs. I was very you asked me why, because I'm just to give you an idea, I was born in 61. So in the 1986, I was in New York for a while. I was so lucky to be there in the garage, the Paradise Garage, because the documentary is about Larry Levan, but of course, Paradise Garage, the club where he spent 10 years of his life. Unfortunately, he died, like you said, 38 in 92, but this was a few years after the garage closed. So the garage, in the 1986, something happened also in New York, very important. The house music became very popular, because before that time, you had only disco, you had the funky music, no house music. The house music came from Chicago with the Frankie Knuckles from the Warehouse. Larry Levan was another maybe testimonial or ambassador for house music in New York. Sorry, that's Miami. That's the sound of Miami, you see? Hip hop. That's another story. And so what's up in New York at the time? We had also another situation that was at Studio 54 that is still very famous. Was completely different, because it was much more glamour, much more fashion, let's say models, let's say Broadway style.
Yeah.
Garage was really underground, was really a place where the black gay teenagers start to be finally independent, and they found the let's say freedom, because they became freedom to show what they were with the music that they love in this place. That was amazing, because now when you talk about garage in New York, you say, oh, garage, they supposed to make the King Street, they supposed to change the name in Larry Levan way. I don't know if you know the story. Something get wrong, I don't know why, but anyway, even if Larry Levan was he was working with something very simple. I'm talking about turntable, no sync, no digital stuff, but he was so creative. He was so amazing. The set he did was so long. They took about 8 hours, 9 hours, maybe 12 hours of the DJ set. Something amazing.
A journey.
And a journey. It's a journey. So Larry Levan did a journey with the music. And that's what most of the people said. Going at the Paradise Garage, it was a journey. Was a musical journey. And what I did, I was lucky, because I am a DJ. I started my career like DJ and producer. But in the meantime, almost 5 years ago, I found on internet interview unique. That was something that a Japanese guy did in 1989 after the garage. But that's very funny also, because at that time in the 80s, the technology was for Japanese people. Think about another important thing, because also after I start the documentary with Claudio Napoli and Massimo Mascolo, they produced the movie, they live in New York. We found another guy, Yuki, from Yuki Watanabe from the Mars, that he had another video, and looks, another Japanese guy. So Japanese, they had the future at the time. They had the camera, and
they were
also
already recording. They knew that it was worth documenting.
And it was impossible make a video and picture inside Paradise Garage. So that's another reason, because this interview was unique. Because believe it or not, there is nothing about Larry. There is nothing about Larry. The only interview is the interview that we put in our movie. So I contacted the DJ. Yeah, it's crazy. DJ Hero from Japan. He was so nice. He gave me the interview. It took out from YouTube. We started the documentary. And I tried to get in touch with the real people very close to Larry. But I was trying to ask who Larry was. Right. Okay, he was a DJ. Okay, he was famous, a legend. But tell me who he was. Why he did this? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great perspective to take, because I think that addresses the question that I was asking you, is that, a lot of us...
Maybe I said too much. I don't want to say too much.
No, not at all. I just wanted to add and say it is something that when I think about him, I think about him as this iconic DJ, but it's true. I don't know much about who he was as a person, and I love finding out that kind of stuff from artists, even modern artists, but of course I think that still applies to Larry. So... But
at the end, he was a guy. He was a normal guy with with a passion.
Yes.
That sometimes today, many people are missing the passion. They are famous DJ. I don't want to mention any names, but they are famous. They are trendy. They are big stage, a lot of fun. Twitter, Instagram. But sometimes there is no passion. There is only money behind this. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to say any names, but believe me, Larry Levan was a guy that was really in love with the music. Unfortunately, he had some problem because, like everybody, he was in contact with strange things like drugs, because of course there is also a sad part, a black part of this story, not black like music, but black like the dark side of this story, the darker side of the story.
Yeah.
It was a very sad end. I mean, the end was not very happy, but like the old genius, like the old famous artists, most of the famous artists, let's say he was, this is something, it's not my quote, it's a Danny Tenaglia quote. He was the Jimi Hendrix. He was the Jimi Hendrix of the disco.
Truly an artist in that way. Yeah. I mean, I was reading about your journey as the director, and how you were trying to reach out to people who knew him as a human rather than just as the DJ. And I was reading. It was
like an investigation. It was an investigation.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. It sounded like such a challenge. Because of course, by the time you had gone into this film, you mentioned, I think in the description, that many of his friends had passed away already, and as you mentioned before, there weren't that many clips of interviews with him.
A lot of AIDS in this story, of course.
Yeah, but
a lot of drugs, a lot of AIDS, a lot of craziness, because was funny, but Garage, they had no alcohol. Think about this. They had no alcohol because they were not allowed, because they had no liquor license. But they had a big punch in the middle of the bar. Everybody put maybe LSD inside.
Oh gosh.
So can you imagine? Maybe nobody remember nothing about it, because it was a crazy journey.
It's a different time back then, huh?
I was there actually. I had that punch, but I don't remember.
You tried the punch. I love that. That's amazing. That's enough. You can say that as your fun fact for the rest of your life.
Yes. No, I was a witness of, I think, one of the best time for clubbing, but not because I'm old. That's sometimes when you are old, you are lucky,
Well, I think that's the best thing about the underground and the different iterations of the underground, is always when people are trying things for the first time or experimenting with something new or different. It's always going to be a little messy.
I'm not promoting this. I'm saying that was a different period, was something different, but young generation, be careful drugs. Be careful everything. Be careful with the sex. Be careful, because now maybe it's too much.
I think the beauty of it now is that we
put the mask.
Definitely wear a mask, and we have the learning lessons from the past, but also I think now a lot of the people who love dance music love the community. You know, they like
Yes.
to communicate with each other and share their learnings. You know, we had such good talks for the past few years about mental health and looking out for one another. So definitely it sounds
agree.
like one of the learning lessons as well. Well, the film sounds amazing. So for people who are watching, who are now curious, where can they find it? Where can they go watch it
On
themselves?
Vimeo. You know, on Vimeo there is you can find on YouTube, because at the moment we keep the project very underground.
Right.
We had a preview.
Just like Larry's Spirit, right? Just underground.
Of course. We had a preview, European preview with the ADE in Amsterdam, because unfortunately they had a problem, you know, with the virus, so they were only online. And but was very good, because, you know, especially for my movie, because it was much easy. I can see on Vimeo the statements. You know, I can see people from all around the world watch the movie, from Australia to Alaska. And that's amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And I think also it's great to know that people can watch it now, but it sounds like you're going to be continuing on to tell people about it, because it truly is a timeless story.
No, thank you very much.
I'm
because
very
believe
excited.
Me,
yeah.
I put all my energy, I put all my money. I don't think I became rich with this movie, but I wanna leave a message, you know, because especially Larry was not my friend. I mean, to be honest, because for me, Larry. But even when I was in New York, I was invited by Larry to another friend of me, you know, of mine. But everything was normal, you know. Of course, if it was today, the first thing when you go in the garage, I want to meet Larry. But that time, I loved the environment.
Yeah.
This place was a really garage with simple light, and everybody dancing, everybody happy. Of course, the music was amazing, but because I was DJ also at that time, so I want to go there and tour with him and knock at the door. Oh, nice to meet. No, let's go.
Funny.
You know, music. No selfie, no picture, nothing.
Yeah,
just
it's funny
enjoy.
how sometimes you're living through history and you don't realize it, you know, and you look back on it and then you can
And then the documentary, of course, I interview many famous people, because of course I was lucky to meet also Frankie Knuckles before he died. There is a little part with Louis Vega, Morales, but you have also normal people from that time, not very famous, but very inside the story, the story.
Well, everyone sounds like fully connected by the passion that Larry demonstrated. But
I appreciate you say this word again.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on to tell me about the documentary, and I'm excited. I encourage everyone watching to go check it out. Go find
Thank
it
you
on
very
Vimeo.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Corrado.
Let's stay in touch.
I can't stop thinking that I look like The Rock because of this black turtleneck, but obviously now we're at the end of the episode, so it's just a little too late to do anything about it. Thank you for joining for yet another episode of The Newsfloor. I am your host, Valerie Lee. We are sharing clips and all the good stuff from every episode on socials at The Newsfloor. If you don't follow us already, we're on Instagram and Twitter. Please give a holler over there. We're going to be back next week here on Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific time, and I can't wait to have you back and see you there. For now, stay safe out there, stay healthy, and I will see you next week.